let's record. So risk management. What is risk management? It's planning for the unknown. كنا كتير we refer to risk management from the contingency reserve part, from the management reserve part. كيف كتير outputs بيكبوا على الريسك register وكتير input من الريسك register to schedule and to estimate costs for those risk response strategies. Whatever the case is, planning for the unknown is something very important on your project, because your project, like any project, is prone to risks, both positive risks and negative risks. Positive risks are called threats, negative risks are called threats, while positive risks are called opportunities. As a project manager, you have to work with both positive and negative risks. You have to exploit positive risks, and you have to reduce the effect or the impact of negative risks. Will contingency reserve اللي هو from the identified risks, whether in terms of money and time. A contingency reserve is the net of both the negative يعني المصاري الريزيرف المحطوطه for the negative risks والمصاري المحطوطه minus deducted from your reserve للopportunities للpositive risks. So at the end of the day, the risk contingency reserve is for both positive and negative risks, and you cannot use a reserve set for risk 1 تستعملوه لrisk 2. So keep this in mind whenever you are dealing with risks. So few 7 processes, starting with plan for risks, plan risk management. رح يطلع فيه كل البلان or the procedures, the templates, etc. of how we are going to go about identifying risk, analyzing risks, planning for risk response strategies, and implementing risk responses as per those strategies. We eventually monitor risk, because we cannot control risk. We monitor the risks. ونشوف شو عم يتغير if we are aligned with the risk management plan. If we need to take corrective action, we issue change requests and we go about the change. As بتلاحظوا أغلبية processes are in planning, because planning for the unknown is a key success factor. And if you don't do this, you will end up having issues on your project. Who can tell me what's the difference between هيدا الشلمسطي على الهارلي ديفيدسون and me on my motorcycle?
Safety.
Be more specific. شو يعني safety?
انت اخذ precautions وعامل حساب يصير شيء. هو
حساب يصير شيء. Nice. حتى ناخذ specific example. أنا عامل حساب إنه توقع البايك أو تفوت البايك بشيء. So حطيت لهون crash bars يحموا. Let me admit someone. سكنة. Okay, so هالcrash bars شغلتهم preventively يحموا الانجن ويحموا الفيرنج تبع الموتور سايكل، right؟ شو بكم جايز طالعين فايتين؟
بس هو جاي بحد ذاته كراش بارز.
هو بحد ذاته كراش بارز. بس هيدا الريسك there is always a risk on
connection كثير عاطل.
connection من عندك. أنا
من عندك إيه عم تقطش.
أنا على 4G. So شو البريفنشن اللي أنا أخذها؟ Is it a proactive prevention or a reactive prevention?
اوكي
ما بنعرف. proactive
يعني هالكراش بار عم بيخففوا شو؟ الامباكت of the accident or the probability of the accident?
impact of the accident.
Exactly. So هيدي specific risk response strategy شغلتها to mitigate the impact. بس اثنيناتنا عنا equal chance to have an accident. Okay? طيب. Now if I say to you إنه my bike has ABS, has traction control وهاز كورنرينج اي بي اس، يعني اذا انت وعلى الكورنرينج and the bike was leaning ودعست فريم قوي
بتجلس حالها.
بيعرف يشتغل بطريقه انه ما يزحطك. هو ما
هون
عنده
probability.
وما عنده تراكشن كنترول. اوكي سو هل سيفتي فيتشرز اللي على الموتور سايكل تبعي عم بيخففوا الامباكت ولا البروبابيلتي اوف ان اكسيدنت؟
probability.
probability exactly. So some measures رح يخففوا ال probability, other measures رح يخففوا ال impact, and you have to work with both. Those are the two aspects. كمان بيلعب دور انه when you have a high risk of having this risk، يعني باي مرحله من الجيرني. انا الجيرني رايح فيها رح اعمل 300 كيلومتر وهو رح يعمل 300 كيلومتر، بس we know انه from kilometer 100 to kilometer 200 في ريسكي رودز، في محلات السيفتي مش موجوده، في تقاطع طرق، في تراكس رايحين جايين. سو بهالمرحله من البروجكت من هالجيرني في الريسك عنده probability اكثر يكون موجود. امتى I have a probability of ما يخلص معي، يعني the risk انه يخلص معي البنزين وما كفي الجيرني.
ما فهمت.
اوكي الريسك فيه يتكرر على البروجكت، يعني هالريسك فيه يكون كونستنت، فيه يكون وان تايم ريسك يمكن يصير باول مرحله من البروجكت، وفيه يكون هالريسك موجود بكل مرحله، يعني كل مثلا 30 لتر، لانه بتساعد 30 لتر بنزين معقول انقطع من البنزين، لكن 30 لتر بتعمل لي ليتس سي 400 كيلومتر، يعني كل 400 كيلومتر this risk might happen of me emptying the tank. so كمان الريسك عنده هالفاكتور، لكن بدنا نطلع بكل هالنواحي وبدنا نطلع بالامباكت of the risk، الفاينانشال امباكت، الكواليتي امباكت، schedule impact etc. so risk management is the process concerned with conducting risk planning, identification of unknowns and risks, analyzing their impact and probability, and implementing response strategies, and monitor and control those on the project. From the project being in control of you to you being in control of the project. And this is done proactively to prevent things that can go wrong. And this is inevitable. Issues and risks and change is inevitable on the project. The objective is to increase the probability and the impact of positive events and decrease the probability and impact of negative events on the project. Uncertainty is what? Uncertainty is a lack of knowledge about something, about an event. بأول البروجكت بتكون الانسرتينتي أعلى شيء، بآخر البروجكت بتكون الانسرتينتي أوطى شيء، لأنه خلصنا بطل في uncertainties، حققنا، سلمنا، we delivered. So work, cost, time, quality, communication, stakeholders, etc. all can be uncertain or represent uncertainties. These uncertainties, however, do not necessarily imply bad unknowns. They could turn into good unknowns or opportunities. وشغلتنا نستفيد and to leverage and to exploit these positive risks. دائما رح نشوف انه في known وفي unknown unknowns. Known risks و unknown risks. Known risks by definition هن the risks that we have identified, that we have classified, grouped, analyzed and planned for. The unknown risks هن these that we were not able to identify or we choose not to manage for a reason, because probably we deflected the risks or we bought an insurance or we've projected the risk to another entity. And these we apply a general contingency plan. كمان ما بنتركهم هيك. We apply a contingency plan لهم based on past similar experience. لكن في threats, the risks with negative impact, في opportunities, the risks with positive impact. For example, adopting an aggressive resource optimization technique is a risk taken in anticipation of a reward of using fewer resources, thus improving the budget variance. So it's an opportunity. The factors that impact risks are the probability that the risk will occur, the impact or range of possible outcomes, and the expected timing of when in the project lifecycle this risk might happen, and the frequency, every 300, 400 kilometers, for example. Tolerance is the amount of risk that your organization will withstand. Example, a risk that affects our reputation will not be tolerated. Any risks impacting our client satisfaction will not be tolerated. So tolerance areas can include, for example, the triple constraints. كل شيء خاصه بالcost. Yes, Eli.
Gabi, سؤال risk, is it inside the company or inside the procedure or it's outside factor?
Both.
كلهم.
Both.
So إذا inside نحن بالسيستم بالكنترول procedure مش مفروض يكون في عنا يعني to prevent this risk.
Yes.
يعني بطل risk هو شغله نحن معقول تصير بس ما اكيد انه تصير.
Yes. You either prevent it or you anticipate and react to it حسب نوع الريسك. Some risks you can prevent. Some risks you can respond to. الريسبونس استراتيجي فيها تكون proactive or reactive رح نشوفهم.
اوكي.
وفيها تجي من جوا وفيها تجي من برا الاورجانيزيشن او حتى البروجكت تيم. So anything related to the triple constraints فينا مثلا نقول scope, cost and schedule will not be tolerated او عندنا low tolerance for. اكيد اذا البروجكت تبعكم project size والبادجت والmaturity of your organization والcomplexity of the project والimportance كلهم هول بيلعبوا دور in your risk management processes. Depending on those, you will tailor what you need from the risk management knowledge area and you embed in your project life cycle. إذا البروجكت كله شهر وما فيها الريسك awareness in your organization, you might skip all the risk processes except for identifying probably the risks. إذا البروجكت too complex أو عم تشتغلوا مع شركة oil and gas, these people are when it comes to safety and risk are highly demanding. So يمكن هون بدهم منكم risk processes يعني أكثر بكتير من اللي رح نشوفه. So it depends, and you have to tailor this based on your project needs. In agile or adaptive environments, لأنه طبيعة approach of the project life cycle في high variability, في يعني في more uncertainty. وهون you cannot apply the risk إذا بدكم processes. But to address this, you need to make sure that you frequently review the incremental work of the user stories يلي ذكرناهم بأجايل to assess those story by story or backlog by backlog. So the risk here is considered when selecting content of each iteration or increment to identify, to analyze, and to manage that risk related to this iteration. And the work is reprioritized based on the improved understanding of the current existing now for that story risk exposure. Plan risk management. It's the process of defining how to conduct risk management activities. يلي ذكرناها. So, and this is a vital plan to obtain agreement and support from all stakeholders to ensure that the risk activities will be supported. بده ينحط لهم budget, بده يتخذ لهم وقت, okay, بالproject life cycle. And planning is very important in this area specifically to provide has sufficient resources to and time and money and everything to go about risk management activities and to establish an agreed upon basis for evaluation and management of the risks. You need the project management plan and all approved sub plans, project charter because it provides the high level risks that you have identified them بالinitiation with requirements that from them we can identify risks, with stakeholder register containing all details related to the project stakeholders. One of the stakeholders could be the risk management department. أكيد has stakeholder عنده very high إذا بدكم bar when it comes to your risk management activities. So this stakeholder is an input. EFs, like the risk attitude in your organization, the thresholds, the tolerance, and OPAs, any risk categories, risk statement formats, standard templates, roles and responsibilities, authority levels, and lessons learned. What are risk statements? Risk statements هن إذا اشتغلتوا بالبيج فورس بPwC كان عندنا a risk universe نسميه, which is a large database of all potential uncertainties per industry, per business area. يعني أنت بتقول أنا عندي مثلا project to implement an ERP system. ال ERP system scope تبعه order to pay, excluding fixed assets. تفضل Mr. Database, Mr. Risk Universe, give me all potential what can go wrong scenarios. يعطيك إياهم. From there you go كنا ناخدهم and to start assessing those risks. Those are like a ready menu of everything possible, of all potential risks possible that can go wrong on a specific engagement at PwC. So your organization might have these already كinput تاخدوا منه. Tools and techniques, meetings to plan for risks, data analysis, and you can use expert. The expert will call your risk management department or an external expert or an internal expert to the team. Data analysis on in the form of analyzing the stakeholder risk profile and their tolerance when it comes to risk, and to assess their requirements when it comes to risk management. And depending on these assessments, you can allocate the appropriate resources, changes to the scope, changes to the schedule, and focus on these risk management activities. During meetings, we meet to manage the risk planning activities, cost elements, schedule activities, risk contingency reserve are discussed during those meetings. The approaches to use the reserves, the approaches to respond to risks, okay, are also discussed in these meetings. رح يطلع the risk management plan فيه our risk response strategy, our risk management strategy and approach. How we are going to approach, مثلا كان عندنا ب PwC approach for risk management اسمه ORCA. O stands for objectives, R stands for risks, C stands for controls, and A stands for alignment, ORCA. So we start by understanding the objectives of the project, whether these are business objectives or project objectives, and then we brainstorm what risks might hinder these objectives. So one objective might have 3 risks, أو العكس, and then we take every risk and we assess the controls. في enough controls to prevent the risk or to respond to that risk? If yes, that's fine. If no, we start designing and tailoring the controls to answer all those uncertainties, and then we align them. We put them back into the business processes. It could be a similar approach or different approach, or a methodology. كمان بيكون فيه roles and responsibilities, defining team members for each type of activity and يعني risk activity. فيه funding, the estimated funds needed for the implementation of the contingency and management reserves. Few timings, when and how often the risk management processes should be carried out. When should we do quantitative risk assessment? When we should do qualitative risk assessment? What are the triggers that will necessitate reviewing the risk register, etc. وبيطلع كمان مثل الwork breakdown structure بيطلع risk breakdown structure depending on the areas of the project like technical risks, management risks, commercial risks, business risks, external risks وبيطلع breakdown لإلهم like a sub-level of the risk breakdown structure by area. Technical risk فيها scope definition, requirements definition. Those are technical project technical risks. Management risks, project management risks. وcommercial risk مثلا contractual terms and conditions not respected. Internal procurement, supplier and vendors. نرجع بنلقط supplier and vendors and we break those down into the risk statements. كمان فيه يكون فيه الريسك stakeholder risk appetite expressed as a measurable risk threshold around each project objectives, and these will determine the acceptable level of the overall risk score, or we call it risk exposure of the project. So the detailed risk assessment and risk scoring once aggregated رح يعطيني total project risk exposure. So إذا بيطلع عندي a high risk exposure, I need to embed more and plan for more risk response strategies later on. إذا بيطلع عندي low risk factor or low risk exposure, then probably I should or I can cut corners when it comes to risk processes. Definitions of risk probability and impact. Since those are key factors in assessing the impact of the risk and the probability, so the definitions of what is a high probability, what is a medium probability, what is a low probability should also be mentioned in the plan. For example, what do we mean by very high when it comes to time? Yani everything with an impact of a delay of 6 months will be considered very high risk, whereas anything with a delay of between 1 to 4 weeks will be considered low risk. Now, everything related to costs إذا هو عنده impact $500,000 to $1 million impact of loss probably, okay? So honey, we're gonna consider this a medium risk, okay? So this as a definition for later on, once we assess the risk scoring for every individual risks, رح نرجع لها البلان ولها legend to identify what is low, what is medium, and what is high when it comes to risk scoring. بيطلع كمان ال probability and impact matrix that depicts visually يعني the high, medium, and low scoring of risks. So anything from 0.4 to 0.72, this dark gray area will be considered high probability and high impact. Therefore, the risk score is high. لأنه رح نشوف الفورمولا could be probability times impact. إذا ال probability نحن عم نستعملها high probability 3, high impact 3, يعني 3 times 3 is 9. كل شيء 9 رح نحطه هون ونعتبره high risk score. ولل opportunities نفس الشيء. كل شيء dark gray يعتبر high probability و high impact as a positive risk, and we need to deal with it later on differently in a low risk with medium risk. So the risk score or risk exposure could be calculated depending on your organization. The simplest way of calculating the risk score is multiplying the probability times the impact. Other organizations might use probability times impact divided by 2. Others might use probability times impact times 4 times, let's say, the head count of the stakeholders divided by 6 or what have you. So you can use different types of formulas. المهم هو interpretation of the risk score, and so that we will use it later on for classification. تنعرف low risk score how to respond to it, medium will high how to respond to these.
Are we responsible to memorize these formulas? And it's easy.
No, this is an example. It's not a formula to memorize.
Yeah, إنه just how to measure it يعني.
Yes. راح يطلع بالبلان كمان reporting formats that describes the content and the format of the risk register, as well as other risk reports with heat maps, with graphs, with recommendations. So any template that you will use for reporting on risk assessment and risk response. Tracking is how risk activities will be recorded and how risk management processes will be audited if need be. طيب. Let me show you a video وعنا بعدين breakout exercise من بعدها. So please watch this video carefully لأنه من بعدها you're gonna break out in 3 rooms and we are going to identify all threats and opportunities from this movie trailer. Movie هو Everest, اسمه Everest إذا حاضرينه. It talks about a team. It's a real story. بدهم يطلعوا على Mount Everest to the summit and everything that happened with them. أكيد الفيلم فيه أكتر بس التريلر you can from the trailer depict at least I want you to come up with 10 specific risks. يعني مش تقولوا لي environment risk. No, I want it specific. I want an avalanche at the altitude of 2,000 meters. هالقد specific. Okay? So let's watch the trailer. Are you ready to take notes?
Human beings simply aren't built to function at the cruising altitude of a 747. Everest is without doubt the most dangerous place on Earth. Don't do that to me, right?
Dragging عندنا معقولة بالconnection.
Yeah.
She was with you.
One day, you, me, and that little Sarah will all go climbing together. It hurts. It's dangerous. Hey, you guys hold on. You're right, good. Okay. All right, steady up. Woo.
I gotta ask the question, you know I do.
Why? I have kids. They see a regular guy can follow impossible dreams. Maybe they'll do the same. The double fingers challenge, we made it. All right, guys, time to go home. Looking good, Beck. Looking good. Get yourself down. There's a massive storm headed your way. There's no oxygen.
Rob, can you hear me? You've got to get moving. You've got to come on down.
اوكي اخذتوا نوت؟
Yes.
بريك اوت رومز. انتوا 15 رح نحطكم ب 3 rooms. So room 1 would be عبدو، إلي، حسام، محمد ورامي. إلي بدر. room 2 so room 1 رح نسميها شيربا. room 2 رح نسميها ياك. تعرفوا شو الشيربا؟ شو الياك؟
بعرف انا الشيربا لانه ما حدا بيطلع ايفرست بلاهم، ما حدا بيقدر يطلع بلاهم، نص الشغل عليهم.
الشيربا yes are the local guides. الياك هو هيدا البيج انيمال يلي بيحملوا عليه الاكل والسبلايز واللي بيمشي بين الحفات، مش موجود الا بالهيمالايا.
مثل العنزه على البقره.
مش عنزي، اكثر ايه اكثر مثل بوفلو، هو يعني كبير. شو بنسمي جروب شادي واليز ولؤي؟ لحظه، ليش هون في 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. رح نحط ساره بروم 3.
بنسميهم بخارى او كاتماندو.
كاتماندو. لحظه، 1 2 3 4. لا، ساره بنرجعها على روم 2 على الياك. بنسميها كاتماندو. كاتماندو. Okay. So your role now is only this. You need to come up with. رجعت عندي على السكرين، sorry. You need to come up with a risk register. Okay. فيه بس هلا 3 شغلات. فيه the risk identification. فيه classification أو category of risk. وفيه source of risk.
جابي بس بدنا نحن نتأيد باللي شفناه بالفيديو ولا فينا we expect something يعني.
Oh no, you can. Video is a technique of you reviewing a document.
Okay.
Okay, and another technique that you are using is meeting to identify risks.
Okay.
بس فيها تكون غير تكنيك كمان عم تستعملوها. Your imagination, your experience, your عم تستعينوا ب subject matter expert, whatever. So the risk is مثلا بدكم تقولوا شو الريسك، اوكي، وشو actually.
الرانك
لا، ما بدي رانكينج هلا we're only identifying everything that can go wrong or good. Okay, لكن مثلا the risk of an avalanche at the altitude of 2000 meters. Category, it's a natural disaster, let's say. Source, it's the I don't
mountain.
know, mountain. يمكن البلديه ما عم تعمل، ما عم بتفجر قصدا تتخفف الافالانش whatever. At this stage ما بدي الا هول. Later on we are going to take بكل بروسس هالريسك ريجستر اللي رح تعملوه على ورقه، اعملوه على ورقه لاندسكيب وخلوا محل كولمز بدنا نزيدهم زياده لنحط البروبابيلتي والامباكت والريسبونس ستراتيجي واتسترا. بس at this stage keep it simple 3 columns بس. And you have 10 minutes from now to come up with 10 unique risks, okay?
Okay.
عم تسمعوني؟
لازم ما بنعرف نتنفس.
اوكي.
شو كمان قد ايه عندك افيلبل شيربا معك؟ قد ايه معك ناس تحمل، لانه في مطرح الياكس والبغال ما بتوصل، فهن بيحملوا لك اكلك وشربك واكسجين.
الشباب بس هي بس كمان
طب خلينا نحن نبلش. عندنا بيس كامب افيلابيلتي.
طيب حسام بس شغله مين عم بيسجل لحتى
يلا انا رح سجل. عندنا بيس كامب افيلابيلتي. شو الكاتيجوري تبعه؟ اي ثينك اتس كاتيجوري ما بعرف بلاننج بالاورجنايزيشن. لازم تكون بس نعمل هايكينج او شيء هيك.
يس هذا بيجي بالبلاننج.
اوكي. والسورس تبعه بدها تكون اكيد هيومن، لانه ريليتد للتيم هيدا اذا ماني غلطان.
اكيد.
اوكي. تاني بارت حكيت عنها هي اوكسجين ليفل.
الاكسجين افيلابيلتي اند سبلايز اند تريننج. قد ايه عندك سبلاي اوكسجين؟
اوكي. كمان هيدي كاتيجوري كمان تيم. السورس تبعها بده يكون التيم. والكاتيجوري كمان
guys you hired an expert. I am the expert. okay. اسالوا لي what can go wrong. انا شو اسمه هيدا اللي بيطلع على شو اسمه هيدا اللبناني بيطلع على الايفرست؟
مكسيم شايا.
مكسيم شايا. انا مكسيم شايا. اسالوا لي what can go wrong. حدا يسالني.
ممكن اذا قطعت الاكسجين نلاقي فوق.
إيه؟
انت شي مره طالع عامل
انا طالع على السطح مره على البنايه.
اوكي. بس رح اقول لك شغله. في عندنا ريل اكسبرت هون اللي هو حسام.
ايه طيب اوكي. انا ام رول بلاينج
على الهيمالايا.
ام رول بلاينج بس. برافو حسام. حسيت انه حسام طلعت وصلت على
بس 2 ليفل. لا بس 2 ليفل كسدره يعني، مش انه طلعت.
اوكي. so at a specific level الاكسجين تانكس بتيجي هليكوبتر بتزت اكسجين تانكس مليانين وبتاخذ الاكسجين تانكس الفاضيين، لانه at a certain altitude ما فيكم تطلعوا بلا اكسجين.
بس اذا كانت الناس عاطل.
سوري؟
اذا كانت الناس عاطل فيهم يجوا الهليكوبتر.
So how many risks can you identify from this fact alone? يلا جو. انا رح اروح على غير الاردن.
في ممكن يصير اصلا مال ديسبيسمنت للاكسجين هو عم ينزل، يعني هي اصلا عم تنزله يعني during.
Who's back?
I'm back.
I'm waiting for the hands.
I'm back.
أتأكد guys. Please raise your hands. Okay. Eli Saliba, Hussam, Muhammad, Sukna, I hope you're back. Okay. We've identified all possible risks, but they are huge number and we cannot manage all identified risks. Therefore, we need to analyze them qualitatively and probably then quantitatively to give them dollar amount impact تنشوف تنخلي or to filter those high risks نعمل لهم a specific strategy والmiddle والlow risk to approach them differently. So perform qualitative risk analysis هو simply put it's the process of assessing the probability and the impact of every risk because you cannot handle all risks identified. So the short list then of the risks can be further taken to the next process اللي هو perform quantitative risk analysis بعد ما نفلترهم من هون, or they can move directly into the plan risk response process because the quantitative risk analysis is an optional process according to PM book if you don't have exposure to the cost elements and the budgeting of the process, because this is where you come up with the contingency reserve. Perform qualitative risk analysis is subjective. يعني sometimes وقت أقول high أو أنا أعطي score of 3 غيري يعطي score of 5, this is subjective. So the qualitative risk assessment is always subjective, whereas the quantitative is down to the dollar. هل qualitative risk analysis is repeated as new risks are uncovered throughout the project, whether بجمعهم and I do qualitative risk analysis, or as and when this risk is identified دغري بعمل له one-on-one هال analysis. I need the risk management plan to follow. شفنا انه في impact probability matrix بدنا نلحقها, شفنا انه definition of probability and impact والscoring تبعهم, so we need, and probably the templates, we need to follow these. Assumption logs, the risk register اللي طلعتوه by now بدنا نزيد له assessment للscoring للimpact والprobability, والEEFs like any industry study for similar project by risk specialists, risk databases that may be available from proprietary sources. مين بيقول لك امتى الريسك اوف افالانش باكثر شهر معقول يكون موجود بالهيمالايا؟ مين بيقول لنا انه the probability of الهليكوبتر ما تعبي الاكسجين tanks is high, medium or low? Okay, so we need to know the environmental and enterprise factors. OPAs, any information on prior similar completed projects. Tools and techniques, expert judgment, كمان data gathering, data analysis. Data analysis هون in the form of risk, probability and impact assessment. So I'm taking every individual risk and I'm assessing its importance and priority by giving this probability and impact a score. Each risk will be scored and rated on its probability of occurrence and impact, which combination of probability and impact then will result in this classification of high, moderate, or low. والprobability and impact matrix يلي حطيت انه بدي الحقها بالبلان, now I am using it to classify and to prioritize those identified risks. Higher probability and impact rated risks will warrant immediate response and will therefore be moved through the risk process, whereas one with lower rating shall be put on a watch list. Hal watch list, I need to keep an eye on it so that if and then something changed, hal risk score معقول يطلع. Probably the chance of it happening تطلع, probably the impact بيطلع. So I need to keep a close eye on the watch list. Data analysis in the form of risk data quality assessment. This is a technique for examining the degree to which the risk is understood and the accuracy, the quality, the reliability, etc. of data about this risk is reliable and accurate. Like I said, مين the best يعطيني الweather condition بكاتماندو بالsummit. Okay, this is risk data quality assessment. If data quality is unacceptable, it may be necessary to gather better data. Risk categorization. I can categorize risks by the source of risk using the risk breakdown structure or the area of the project. مثل ما انتم كنت عم بسمع ب one of the breakout rooms انه This is a planning risk, okay? Or related to a work package, or other useful categories like the project phase, to determine the areas of the project that are most exposed to the effects of uncertainties. يعني عملنا assessment طلع عندنا مثلا the area of production of the engine of the plane على هالproject هي عندها high risk score, so that we can put all our emphasis there. Risks can also be aggregated by common root causes of the risk. This technique helps determine the work packages, the activities, the phases, or even the roles in the project, which can lead to proper development of risk responses. Hal data representation of probability and impact could be represented in bubble charts, okay, like this one. The bigger the bubble, the higher the risk. بيطلع updates على documents like the assumption logs, because new assumptions were made for new constraints or risks. Updates على issue log, update على risk register now with the risk ranking or the score, the urgency category, okay, and it will be sorted by high, medium, low. بيطلع risk report to reflect the most important individual risks with the highest probability and impact, with summary and conclusion and recommendation for the team. Quantitative risk analysis, إذا بتلاحظوا كمان الأوتبوت هو mainly the risk report and the risk register. So this is where we numerically analyze the effect of the identified risks. يعني أخذنا from the qualitative high risks وكفينا نعمل لهم quantitative analysis in order to support the decision making and to reduce the uncertainty. Example, a rating of a risk بالqualitative might be 5. Here it is stated as $40,000 cost impact بالquantitative. And it is performed on risks that have been prioritized أكيد بالqualitative. وهذا process should be repeated كمان as needed. So it's a numerical analysis of the highest risk on the project to determine which events require most attention, to determine the overall risk exposure, $250,000 risk exposure, and to determine from the Monte Carlo technique the overall quantified probability of meeting the project objectives. The outcome of Monte Carlo technique is, for example, we only have 80% chance of completing the project within 6 months required by the customer at a $90,000 cost variance. Also to determine the cost and schedule reserve. تتذكروا حكينا كتير على contingency reserve. This is where we come up with the contingency reserve. And to create the realistic and achievable cost, schedule, and scope targets. لأنه الcontingency reserve risk response strategies بكلفوا وقت وبكلفوا مصاري وبيزيدوا على requirements. So de facto, those will impact the triple constraints. However, this is not required for all projects and may be skipped in favor of moving to risk response planning. I need the risk management plan, scope, schedule, and cost baselines. I need the risk register and the risk reports from previous reports as a reference point, assumption log, the basis of estimate, cost and duration estimates, etc. Industry studies from similar projects by specialists, risk databases, information from prior similar projects. Tools and techniques, representation of uncertainty. This is when the duration, the cost, or the resource requirements are uncertain. The range of possible values can be represented as a probability distribution. Hal probability distribution could be continuous or discrete. In the continuous probability distribution, we represent the uncertainty in values such as duration of scheduled activities and costs for the project components. Discrete used to represent the uncertainties such as the outcome of a test or possible scenario in a decision tree. had discrete distribution decision tree اللي هنشوفها in details later on. One of the data analysis technique is the sensitivity analysis. هون بنستعمل what's called the tornado diagram. The objective is to determine which risks have the most potential impact, both positive and negative. Once we sort this data and we come up with the tornado diagram, رح يفرجينا as a tornado from top down, أهم risks being on the top, having the most impact, positive and negative impact. So risk 1 عنده a negative impact أعلى شيء وعنده positive impact كمان أعلى شيء. Monte Carlo or simulation techniques تيفرجينا كمان إذا بدكم the probability and impact on achieving the project objectives. Monte Carlo analysis is something فيها heavy calculations and it cannot be done without a computer. Okay, والهيدا اللي عم تعطينا إياه إنه we have 85% chance of costing of 2.45 million or less على البروجكت. Decision tree. Decision tree is used to make an informed decision today, okay, about the future while considering the risks. So we have a decision. We can go this way or this way. Which way should we go? Okay, this is the main outcome of a decision tree. So it takes into account future events in trying to make a decision today. It is also used in business decisions, not only in risk assessment. So it calculates something called the expected monetary value. مش EVM, مش earned value analysis, ما تلخبطوا بيناتها. EMV, earned monetary value, or earned value for short, in more complex situations than the expected monetary value رح نشوفه later on. So, expected monetary value is a statistical concept that will take the sum of all probabilities and impact, okay, of a specific occurrence. So it's calculated by multiplying the value of each possible outcome, option 1 and option 2, by its probability of occurrence and adding them together. Now, this is a typical exam question. If a project has a 60% chance of $100,000 profit and a 40% chance of $100,000 loss, what is the expected value of this project? The formula is what? I sum up all outcomes, positive outcomes and negative outcomes. So شو الفورمولا هون؟
ما نضرب ال 100,000 بال 60 وما نضرب ال 100,000 الثاني بال 40% وما نجمعهم.
Yeah, so 0.6 times يا لطيف شو بطيئة times 100,000 خلص انسوا I will not annotate, it's very slow. ما بدها طيب 0.6 times 100,000 watt profit يعني positive and 0.4 times a negative 100 شو النت؟
فبيطلع 60,000 ناقص 40,000.
مظبوط بس بطلت الماوس بدها تشتغل.
خلص 60,000 ناقص 40,000 بيطلع 20,000. Yeah, this is the answer.
I'm trying to remove, yeah. Okay, so 60,000 plus negative 40,000 يطلع 20,000. شو يعني؟ Since the result of adding those both scenarios is positive, I'm gonna pursue this. Then this is a profitable outcome. I'm gonna go with it. Hussam, I might be out. Okay. Azim. Let me show you another video بيشرح الديسيجن تري أكتر.
Have you ever had a hard time
أنا ما عندي صوت.
جابي ما عندنا صوت ابدا.
ما في صوت.
Have you ever had a hard time making a choice?
سمعتوا هلا الصوت؟
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes it can be difficult to weigh the options objectively. This is where a decision tree can help. Imagine you're going to be a vendor at the county fair, and you can choose between two options, a hot dog stand or an ice cream stand. The hot dog stand can earn up to $350 a day. The ice cream stand can earn up to $400 a day. Which one should you choose? In this scenario, the answer is obviously the ice cream stand. But life is a little more complicated than that. For the hot dog stand, you'll need to buy supplies like buns, hot dogs, condiments, and a warmer. Let's say you spend $70 a day on supplies. And to keep it simple, let's say your stand has a 50-50 chance of success. If it succeeds, you'll earn $350. And if it fails, you'll lose $70 due to the cost of supplies. For the ice cream stand, you'll need cones, ice cream, and a freezer. Let's say you spend $100 a day. But there's a problem. You discover that it's supposed to be cloudy over the weekend. When people are cold, they don't eat as much ice cream, so the stand has a lower chance of success. In fact, you imagine it'll probably only have a 40% chance of success. If you are successful, you'll earn $400. But if you fail, you'll lose $100 due to the cost of supplies. Now, it's not so simple. Which one do you choose? Using a decision tree gives you a visual representation of what your choices are and what your potential outcomes are. To make the decision, you can use the following formula. For a given option, the chance of outcome 1 times the financial result of outcome 1 plus the chance of outcome 2 times the financial result of outcome 2 equals a figure called the expected value. Translated into our hot dog versus ice cream story, you can interpret the equation in this way. The chance of success times the potential earnings plus the chance of failure times the potential losses equals the expected value. You can compare the expected value of different options to determine which is the best choice. So for the hot dog stand, 50% success times $350 plus 50% failure times negative $70 equals an expected value of $140. And for the ice cream stand, 40% success times $400 plus 60% failure times negative $100 equals an expected value of $100. Now which one should you choose? You want the option with the highest probability of a good financial outcome. Both options have risks, but one of these options has a better chance in spite of those risks. That option is the one with the highest expected value. In this case, the hot dog stand. Now, $140 expected value doesn't necessarily mean you will earn $140. It just means that based on the probability of success and potential earnings, the average result would be about that if you repeated the hot dog stand experiment many times under the same conditions. But there is no guarantee that you'll get an average result in the real world. So a decision tree like this one can't predict how much money you will actually make, but it can help you make an objective choice, especially when there are risks involved. It's one of the many tools you should have in your kit when you start a business, or anytime you're facing a tough decision.
عظيم. So اللي فهمناه منها من هيدي الشغله انه this is the formula. It's the sum of all potential probabilities and impact of a given scenario, knowing that we have uncertainties in place. Hal expected value is also can be used in business strategies. Yani let's say you're hearing me, right? Okay. Let's say أنا معي 10 مليون دولار وبدي أفتح ريستورانت. بيجي البزنس كونسلتنت بيقول له للأونر طيب وين بدك تفتحه؟ بيقول لي بدي أفتحه ببيروت على الروشة. بيجي الكونسلتنت بيقول له طيب what about the potential يعني chance of this restaurant not working بهاللوكيشن؟ ما بعرف. Probably you have a 50-50% chance of success. As a business strategy, why not opening 3 restaurants أصغر بس نفتح 3 restaurants in 3 different locations. هيك بنكون عم نقوي chance of success if one location failed due to مثلا ما بعرف any condition. الروشة صار فيها مشكلة ما عليها إجر etc. So by repeating this business نستعمل earned expected monetary value to يعني نستفيد من هال-uncertainties ونعمل hedging على outcome of our project. It can also be used in project management. Whenever you have something like this, وبيجي and you are in planning phase, okay? And you want to come up with the scope. طيب you are facing a decision. طيب نحن the project objective is to increase demand. بدنا نكبر الديماند تبعنا من X ل Y. طيب what should we do? Shall we upgrade the existing plant or shall we build a new plant? If we build a new plant, we have a 60% chance of strong demand. If you upgrade the plant, we also have a 60% chance of a strong demand. But في لهم capacities. Upgrading the plant will give me a capacity of only $120 million return. But building a new plant رح يعطيني $200 million return on that investment. In the case of weak demand, which I have 40% chance of it, new plant رح يعطيني 90 مليون بدل ال 200 مليون. والweak demand على الابجريد رح يعطيني 60 مليون بدل ال 120. طب where shall I go? How can I decide? This is where decision trees come to the help, to the rescue. طيب شو عم نقول؟ عم نقول انه عنا هون strong demand 60%. Okay? بس في initial cost of building the new plant اللي هو 120 مليون دولار. والinitial cost of upgrading the plant اللي هو $46 million. Now, إذا أنا بدي أعمل decision tree دغري راح روح أقول له للسبونسر إنه go ahead and invest in building a new plant لأنه فينا نطلع 200 مليون. بس ما طلعت أنا بالشو؟ بالuncertainties.
الامباكت.
Exactly. طيب هل expected monetary value تبع كل وحدة شو هي؟ هي 60% chance of a potential 200 minus the initial investment يعني بقي 80 مليون يعني 60% chance of 80 million profit plus 40% chance of 90 minus 180 صار negative 30. يعني عندي 40% chance of a potential loss of 30 million. If I add them together راح يطلع 36 million. طيب, what about the other route? The other route is to upgrade. Okay. عندي 60% chance of a 120 مليون دولار ناقص الانيشال investment of upgrading 46. يعني عندي 46% chance of a 70 million profit زيادة. والweak demand عندي 40% chance of 60 minus 46. It's a positive outcome also بس قليل 10 مليون بس اثنيناتهم اعطوني positive outcome. Donc the expected value of upgrading is 46 million. The expected value of building a new plant is 36 million. Which way shall I go now? I go with the highest expected monetary value اللي هو 46 million اللي هو upgrading the plant. Make sense? Capish? So, do you have questions on this one? إذا فهمتوا هاي, you will be able to answer all decision tree and expected value questions on the exam.
Sorry, بس هول examples موجودين بالسلايدز اللي عنا ما بعرف.
I don't care إذا موجودين ولا لا.
I prefer to them.
موجودين بالسلايدز اللي عندكم ايه بس ما موجودين بالكتاب. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
يمكن بلا موجودين بالكتاب. المهم تفهموها. ايه اللي
It's clear, yeah.
ايه اللي عندك question؟
بس بهالكيس هون الايرند فاليو بس عم تعطينا اذا بدك مثل تندنس بس عم نحكي financially wise يمكن to build a new plant يعني عم نحط investment عم يكون في عندنا assets ما بعرف
ما this investment هو 120 مليون
direction يعني عم تعطينا بس مثل هنت انه احسن نعمل upgraded plan بس يمكن اذا عملنا to build a new plant رح يكون في عندنا asset رح يكون في عندنا production اكثر على المدى البعيد I don't know.
ايه انت عم تحسب بس البوزيتيف اوتكم بس هون اذا رحت هيك ما بتكون عم تحسب كمان the chances of failure.
Okay.
To have an informed decision بالبزنس. فهمت شو قصدي؟ بس this is not 100% science.
اكيد ايه اكيد it's not science.
بس to have an informed يعني decision.
Okay.
Exercise. Your company is trying to determine if prototyping is worthwhile on the project. وفي له كلفية البروتوتايب كلفيته $200,000 بس إذا بنعمل بروتوتايب chances of failure رح تقل كتير من 70% ل 35%. طيب, based on the information provided below, what is the expected value of your decision? Shall you prototype or not to prototype? This is the question. Go ahead. 2 minutes. اوكي بروتوتايب بس واي بروتوتايب؟ حدا بالشات قال لي بروتوتايب. You are saying prototype. Just give me the number.
هي 200 plus I think 42 بيطلع 242 بينما تحت 0.7 ضرب 450 بيطلع 315 I think. الرقم الأوطى اللي هو the better choice.
Exactly. يعني بدي اروح على الكوست الاوطى هون بهالسيناريو، مش الريتيرن الاعلى، بدي اروح على الكوست الاوطى. Great. So هون this is the solution. If I'm going to prototype عندي 35% probability و شو هيدا دخلك؟ اعطيني اياها ايه $120 impact. اوكي. So 0.35 times 120 equals 42,000. بس بدي زيد عليها the cost of prototyping تطلع 242,000 cost impact. إذا we failed بالprototype. If we pass, no impact. طيب if we don't prototype and the chance of failure أعلى 70% والimpact أعلى بكتير 450,000 بيطلع 315. لكن I should select prototype because it has the less cost of failure. Okay? بقدر اخذ الchance تبعي and not to prototype. Yes, definitely. But I should now يعني be doing an informed decision about this decision. Informed decision about this decision. كيف هيدي؟ Yeah. شي هيك. So the answer is to prototype. So quantitative risk analysis بده يطلع updates على الريسك report, the assessment of the overall risk exposure, فيه detailed probabilistic analysis of project يعني from Monte Carlo technique, amount of contingency reserves needed رح تطلع هون, prioritized list of risks after qualitative and quantitative analysis will recommended risk responses. Plan risk response بناخد ال prioritized risks and we develop options and actions to enhance the opportunities and to reduce the threats. It addresses the risks by their priority, inserting resources, activities, whether to react or to prevent, into the budget, into the schedule, and into the project management plan as needed. Risk responses could be or should be appropriate to the significance of the risk. ما بدي اتصيد عصفور بمدفع. اوكي؟ يعني ما بدي احط risk response strategy بتكلفني اكثر من البوتنشال loss. اوكي؟ بده يكون cost effective in meeting the challenge. بده يكون realistic with the project context. بدها تكون agreed upon by all parties involved. وبدها تكون owned by a responsible person to initiate this response strategy if and when this risk occurred. Responses may include doing something to eliminate threats before they happen, like the leaning ABS in the motorcycle, or decreasing the probability and impact of threats, like wearing a helmet and wearing a neck brace and a knee brace, and etc. Because if the accident happened, the impact will be much lower. For the remaining, the residual risks, we can do something if the risk happens. We fall back to a contingency plan. والcontingency plan كثير مؤسسات مثلا المفروض يكون عنده إياه especially financial institutions. Plus يعني they should have 3 plans. يعني they should have the crisis management plan, then they move to contingency plan, then they move to business continuity plan in order. اوكي وكل المصارف مطلوب منها تعمل هول البلانز وتجربهم وتطبقهم. هلا also to do something if the contingency plan fails or is not effective, to have a fallback plan. To plan risk responses, I need the risk management plan, a resource management plan to activate the risk responses, and the cost baseline to add to it and to change to it because this is cost money. And the risk register, risk reports, the schedule, team assignments, calendars, lessons learned, and stakeholder register. Tools and techniques. Several risk response strategies are available. Now, the risk analysis tools, such as a decision tree analysis, for example, can be used to choose the most appropriate response. Shall we prototype? This is a response. Prototyping is a proactive response to reduce risks, right? Primary and backup strategies are also necessary, and a fallback plan is developed if the strategy turns out not to be fully effective. What are secondary risks? Secondary risks are introduced as a result of implementing a risk strategy. يعني, let's say السيرفرز عندنا معقول تضربهم زاعقة and data will be lost. This is a risk. If data will be lost, رح نروح نجيب backup tapes from another location ونرجع نعمل restore للداتا. Okay, this is the risk response. طيب, what if during the route نحن وجايبين التيبس من الأشرفية على الحمراء صار في accident واحترقوا التيبس. This is a secondary risk that is attached to the primary risk, okay, as a result of us implementing the primary risk. شفتوا لوين راحوا فيها يعني جماعة البي ام بوك؟ حدا جابوا حدا قالوا له بتعرف ريسك مانجمنت بليز بزق لنا theories in the risk chapter. اوكي؟ طيب الريسك ريزيرفز اللي حكينا عنها مطولا عم تطلع بهيدا البروسيس. شو اسمه البروسيس اللي بيطلع ريسك ريزيرفز؟ plan risk responses. اكيد when I'm planning for risk responses عم اقول بدي اعمل باك اب تيبس. هالتيبس حقهم مصاري. الشخص اللي بده يعمل الباك اب سوفت وير، اللايسنس كله حقه مصاري. بدي زيدها على البادجت. So هالريسك ريزيرفز هن contingency reserves for the known unknowns يلي بزيدهم على البروجكت استيميت تيطلع لي الكوست بيز لاينز. والمانجمنت ريزيرفز هن the lump sum for the unforeseen events, and this is where I should get approval before spending from this reserve. Whereas in the contingency reserve, if the triggers of the risks occurred كcriteria بقدر اسحب منهم واستعملهم as needed. Tools and techniques to respond to risks. I can escalate the threat, I can avoid the threat, I can mitigate, transfer, or accept the threat. شو يعني escalate the threat؟ يعني I can, for example, escalate it to the portfolio manager, that's someone over and above my pay grade. Or I can avoid by eliminating the threat cause. Example, extending the schedule or reducing scope or implementing quality tests. Or I can mitigate by reducing the probability or the impact by wearing a helmet, by having a knee brace, or conducting more tests, or choosing a more stable supplier or an experienced consultant. I can transfer or deflect. ما حدا انتبه للأرقام غلط هون. سوري بس لحظة تطلع الكلب. Transfer the risk, I can deflect or allocate to some entity, some other entity. I can shift the impact to a third party, like having an insurance. Or if I'm buying from a supplier, اجبروا بperformance bonds. تعرفوا شو performance bonds؟ وقت بتقدموا شغل مع الدولة مثلا بيطلبوا منكم performance bond، بتحطوا لهم مثلا بالبنك $1000 لعل وعسى you did not perform بيخصموها منكم. Warranties are transferring. يعني by having a warranty you are transferring the risk. or outsourcing the work. When you outsource the work, you are transforming the risk of potential low quality deliverables to someone who you are outsourcing the work to. And you can accept the risks. Acceptance could be active acceptance or passive. Active انه رح نقبل الريسك بس رح نحط لها contingency plan. It's going to be part of the contingency plan, and ورح نحط لها contingency plan time and cost reserve. Passive acceptance رح نتركها ربانية, and we will determine workarounds if and when the risk occurs. Avoidance and mitigation are good for critical risks with high impact. Don't accept them like this. Transference and acceptance are good for threats that are less critical and or with low impact. لل opportunities مثل الثreats كمان we can escalate, we can exploit اللي هي عكس الريزيرف بالثreats. نستغل مثلا by assigning the most talented resources to reduce time or use new technologies to reduce cost. We can enhance اللي هي عكس mitigate by adding resources, for example, to an activity to finish early. We can share المفروض be joint venture or be strategic partnership مع third party to share the opportunity, or we accept we are willing to take advantage of the opportunity if it arises, but we are not actively pursuing it. Contingency response strategies. These are designed for use only if certain events are triggered. So the triggering criteria should be well specified in the response plan. It is often called contingency plans or fallback plans and include the triggering events. A contingency reserve is often allocated for time or cost. If developed for risks, it may include the identification of the conditions that trigger its use. Okay? إذا الهارد ديسك ما بقى عم بيقرا، إذا الهارد ديسك صار فيه physical defect، إذا السيرفر بطيء, those criteria will trigger this risk and therefore the restore and bringing the tapes from Ashrafi. So tell me, if you are removing a work package from the scope or an activity from the schedule, which risk response strategy is this? Are you mitigating? Are you transferring? Are you avoiding? What?
Avoiding.
أنا بقول mitigating.
ما مشيت animation. Okay, you are avoiding. It's a threat and you are avoiding it. If you move work package to a date when more experienced resources are available, this is an opportunity that I'm exploiting by having this response strategy, right? So Axel, avoid. Outsource a work package so as to gain an opportunity. I'm sharing because it's an opportunity. Notifying management that there should be a cost increase if a risk occurs because no action is being taken to prevent it. This is active acceptance, okay? Outsourcing difficult work to a more experienced company, I'm transferring the work. Provide a team member who is less experienced with additional training so that ما يلخبط وما يعمل أغلاط. I'm mitigating the probability of doing mistakes. Train the team on conflict resolution. I'm mitigating the impact يلي بيصير من جراء الconflict. Prototyping a risky piece of equipment. I'm mitigating the probability of failure. Okay? رح يطلع change requests أكيد. Change request على scope, change request على schedule, على cost, baselines, etc. Updates على project management plan and subsidiary plans. Update على risk report with now the contingency reserves and the overall exposure, risk exposure. Updates على risk register now with the agreed upon the response strategies, the trigger conditions, the budget, the schedule impact to implement this chosen response strategy, will contingency plan and their triggers, will fallback plans, will residual risks, will secondary risks, etc., etc. Now you have a complete risk register. Exercise. You are planning the manufacturing of an existing product. Modification. You are updating a product. Your analysis has come up with the following risks. What is the cost of the contingency reserve that you would use at the end? Yani شو net of your contingency exposure? You have 2 minutes. I gave you the hints in red. Shall we correct? Okay, so 30% chance of delay. Yani, it's a threat. The threat, I'm going to add to the contingency reserve. The opportunity, I'm going to subtract from the contingency reserve. Okay? The contingency reserve, net تبعه هو النت of all threats minus opportunities. So 0.3 times 9,000 equals 2,700. Since it's a threat, I'm going to add it. Plus a negative 2,000 because this is an opportunity. $10,000 cheaper. Now, 25% probability that two parts will not fit together when installed, costing an extra. This is a threat. I'm going to add. This is an opportunity. I'm going to subtract. This is a threat. I'm going to add. If I add 2007 و2875 و750 و250, the net will be 1,075. هذا الشيء شو بيعني؟ يعني you have the responsibility of exploiting opportunities and mitigating threats. ما في استعمل كل بس الثreats وما فكر بالopportunities. Okay? So I have a responsibility to exploit opportunities on the project. Therefore, the reserve رح يقل. هلا, let me ask you this question. At the end of the project, قد ايه بيبقى من هال $1075 كريزيرف؟ تنقول باقي منهم $500 وخلص البروجكت. ال $500 شو بيصير فيهم؟
هدول جايين او شو؟
No, this is a reserve. هال $500 هن just a book value بيصيروا zero. They be written off. ما في اخذهم انا ربح. اوكي.
شو بنعمل فيهم بدلهم؟
ما هن اصلا مش يعني ما فوترتيهم انت يعني those are only a reserve مثل ريزيرف الذهب بامريكا. It's a reserve. Okay. So
حساباتنا بالبنك.
at the end of the project this reserve becomes zero. De facto.
ممكن استعمله لبعدين؟
نو ما هذا عم اقوله ما فيك تستعمليه بعدين وكل ريسك بطل معقول يصير يعني the probability of a delay in the receipt of parts إذا we received the parts بأول شهر أوكي وما بقى هالريسك معقول يصير هال 2007 ما بقى فيك تستعمليها راحت أوكي فهمتي شو قصدي؟ يعني بالريسك اسسمنت رح ترجعي تقولي مش بالريسك اسسمنت بالمونيتور ريسكس رح تشيلي وتزيدي وتحطي على الريزيرف حسب اذا هالريسك استعملنا له الريزيرف تبعه او هالريسك ما صار ما فينا نستعمل الريزيرف تبعه. Implement risk responses. This is where we implement the agreed upon response plans. Yes.
بس سؤال يعني على الريزيرف انه اليوم عم بتقول انه ما بقى بالبوكينج موجودين كريزيرف بس انا اوريدي عندي اياهم كان كاماونت حاجزه ريزيرف ما استعملته وين بيروح؟
عم لك
بده يرجع بالاخر على البروفيت.
No, it will be netted off. It will be over يعني بالاكونتنج خلص you update وبتلغيه رايت اوف.
بس بدي كثير مقابيله لغايته وين راح؟
كيف يعني مقابيله؟ ما هيدا منه actual
يعني
expense. هيدا منه actual expense او شيء انت فوترته ك deferred revenue. It's not a deferred revenue on the project.
لا بس اماونت انا حاجزه عندي ما راح استعمله الا لهالريسك اللي صار مثل انفورسين اخذ مبلغ انفورسين تركو ديديكيتد لنقول $2700
حاجزه physically in bank notes ما حاجزه physically in bank notes وحتى لو حاجزه physically in bank notes بدك ترده.
اوكي لوين بدي رده؟ هذا اللي بدي اقوله.
بترده على وات ايفر ذا بروسيجر
يعني بالاخر سيت مانك اغانيه صار.
هيدا منه ربح اصلا هيدا cost as a reserve is something happened.
اوكي بس انا ما صرفته ما صار عندي ربح؟
نو ما فيك تحسبه ربح. ريزيرف ما فيك تحسبها ربح. ما تطلع لها from a commercial point of view انه انا عم سعي لزبون $100,000 و$20,000 فوقها ريسك ريزيرف. دونك رح ابعث له فاتوره بالبروجكت 120,000 واذا هالريسك ما صار هال 20,000 انا بحطهم بجيبتي. It's not the case.
اوكي. سو انا الريسك ريزيرف ما بدخلها بالكوست تبع البروجيكت. يعني بالسيل حتى ما بعتبرها هي از كوست.
بتدخلها بالبادجت يس بس ما فيك تفوتها.
اوكي.
It's a budget. هل اكسبانس صرفته؟ يعني جبت سيرفرات جبت هارد ديسكات محل الهارد ديسكات يلي احترقوا اذا يس بتزيدها على الاكشوال كوست. If no you write it off.
Okay. Thank you.
So implementing these agreed upon response strategies and ensuring those responses are executed as planned بهال implement risk response process. And it is performed throughout the project where and when needed, proactively and reactively. You need the risk management plan, you need the risk register mainly, and the risk report, and lessons learned from similar projects. Tools and techniques. بيطلع change requests وبيطلع updates على issue logs because it might يعني have an issue that materialized. Lessons learned. Team assignments because you are responding to response. You are responding to risks and you have activities to follow. You might be changing the team assignments. The risk register is updated and the risk report is updated. إذا عملت risk assessment later on. Monitor risks. هون I'm tracking the identified risks. I'm monitoring residual risks, I'm identifying new risks, and I'm evaluating the effectiveness of my risk management processes throughout the project. Other purposes of monitor risks, mainly this is a monitoring and controlling process, remember, are to determine if analysis shows an assessed risk has changed or can be retired from the risk register. Is it still applicable or not? Risk management policies and procedures are being followed in accordance to the risk management plan, and contingency reserves for cost or schedule are here modified to be in line with the current risk assessment. I need the risk management plan, the risk register mainly. I need deliverable status, progress على schedule, actual costs incurred to track and monitor her risks. I need work performance reports like my variance analysis, my earned value data, my forecasting data, any useful metric in controlling performance that are probably cost or delays or other things. Tools and techniques, data analysis, like a technical performance analysis or a reserve analysis. قد ايه بعد باقي بالريزيرف؟ قد ايه فينا نستعمل؟ أي risks should we retire, etc. We can do audits to examine and document the effectiveness of our risk response plans and strategies. And this is where the project manager is responsible for ensuring that risk audits are being performed as per the risk management plan, whether internally or externally to the organization. Meetings and project risk management should be the agenda of every periodic status meeting on the project. بيطلع work performance information, بيطلع change requests, whether those are corrective actions, including the implementation of contingency plans and workarounds. بيطلع recommended preventive actions, those activities that ensure that future performance will be aligned with the plans. وupdate على البروجكت مانجمنت بلان. يطلع كمان updates على الريسك ريجستر، ايها زاد ايها تغير، شو الستاتس تبعه، قد ايه صرنا صارفين as a response strategy, etc. بيطلع updates على templates، مثلا the probability and impact matrix could be updated or the risk register template could be updated. وupdate على risk breakdown structure. Typical exam questions. What to do with non-critical risks? رح يعطيكم different scenarios بالexam. You should pick up a hint from the question إنه this is a non-critical risk. ورح يسألوكم شو بتعملوا بالnon-critical risks. So شو بتجاوبوا؟ Always document them in a watch list and revisit them periodically to see if their scoring has changed. Would you choose only one risk response strategy? No. You can select a combination of more than one. What risk management activities are done during the execution of the project? شفناهم أغلبيتهم planning و controlling. So watching out for the watch listed non-critical risks by execution that increases in importance and looking for additional risks to document, to analyze, to respond to. This is what's happening in execution. What is the most important item to address in team meetings? Risks. How would risks be addressed? By asking the question, what is the status of my risks? Are there any new risks? Is there any change to the scoring, the magnitude, the order of importance? And how are we managing the risks? So read carefully those situational questions بالexam, describing changes resulting from risk processes to determine whether the actual work has begun or not. If the project work has not begun, the suggested changes are likely part of the plan risk responses update outputs. Otherwise, the changes will be part of monitor risks output. Any questions?